Thank you all for joining. I'm very much looking forward to talking about my team's workflows, how to get new content into our systems, and getting content updated as well. So let's get started. So a couple of things that I'll go over, and I just want to emphasize again, please ask questions. I usually like these to be as interactive as possible, so don't hesitate to ask any questions. If I don't know the answer, I'll be happy to follow up with you later. So we'll start with doing a brief overview of the knowledge bases and the discovery tools, just to make sure we're all speaking the same language and basic concepts are handled. Then I'll walk through the content ingestion process. I'll touch on the new content, and in addition to getting content refreshed, updated, new titles added, etc. Then I'll go through my team, provider relations. We'll go through our workflows and the different outreach activities that my team handles. And then last but certainly not least, I have an idea for new content. What can I do to get it in Ex Libris products? And you may have noticed that I capitalized the I for idea, and that is for good reason. But we'll touch on that a little bit later. Okay, so a brief overview of our products, right? So we have two different sides of the house, the knowledge base side and the discovery side. So for the knowledge bases, you may be very familiar with these: Alma, 360, Client Center or Toda, and SFX. Within those products, there's a number of different things that you can do with content, link resolver handling, resource management, and of course, rights management, which we see here on the screen. So when you're in the knowledge base products, you would turn on the content to enable it for rights for CDI if you have one of our discovery products, either Summon or Primo. Once you turn it on in the knowledge bases after the rights refresh, then you can see the content appear in the discovery systems. It's very important that I emphasize this because there are two different ingestion streams and two different methods of handling the content as it goes into the system. You can see on the bottom left here the title level, and then on the right, middle to right side, we have the article level. And Scott will be dropping in the article. Thank you, Scott. So as I mentioned earlier, it's important to emphasize that there's two different sides. So in the knowledge bases, it's title level metadata. We emphasize using KBART and MARC records for the knowledge bases. And that is primarily for the, as I mentioned earlier, the electronic resource management and link resolving. On the other side, we have the discovery index. This is article level metadata. It is much richer than the title level metadata. So we include metadata such as subject terms, full text, abstracts, etc. Discovery also allows for greater granularity for patrons to find the content that you have purchased. On the Summon side of the house, we also ingest the local catalogs. Providers supply metadata in MARC, but more typically XML. There is an asterisk here to note that particularly on the CDI side of things, we do require a legal agreement, and I'll go into more details about that. Oh, and also another asterisk to indicate that when it comes to XML, there isn't a set standard like we do have on the knowledge base side with KBART. So XML can come in a variety of standards. We also ingest other formats other than XML and MARC. We will ingest providers' proprietary metadata. Okay, so now that we've got the basics down, now that we've talked about the two different systems, the two different sides of the house, I'll get into how does new content get into our system. So I'll start very high level, very basically. We receive a new content request. My team then comes into play, and we will find the provider and try to work with them. We will go through multiple attempts for outreach. We won't try just once, we will try multiple times. And sometimes we do require the help of our community to find a provider contact. Sometimes with providers, with brand new providers that we're working with, we only have a contact us form in order to reach out to the provider. As you can imagine, with some organizations, that doesn't go very far, and we may rely on the help to get a salesperson or an account manager or somebody within the organization that will be willing to talk to us. Once we are successful in reaching out, we will sign an agreement. Again, there's an asterisk here, and I'll get into more details. At that point, once we have the metadata, the agreement is signed, we will ingest the content. as long as it is not archival content, meaning it does require updates, then we will use our tools and automation system in order to set up automatic updates. After that, when we're in this beautiful state of all the content being loaded, we will continue to maintain it and continue to support it, either with the provider reaching out to us to ask questions or from the community. So, sounds simple, but there are a lot of caveats to that, which I will get into now. I just want to make sure that box is hidden. There we go. So, where does the new content come from? Primarily from the idea exchange. So that is where we learn about new providers to ingest into our system. And actually, I should say, primarily we get new content requests from our existing providers because we have so many of them. Some of the big names that you may recognize, including ProQuest, all the way to what I love to refer to as the mom and pop shops, the smaller vendors who have quality content that we want to see in our systems. As I mentioned earlier, we will reach out to the provider through multiple attempts and through multiple means as well. Typically, our form of communication is through email, but we also are happy to get onto calls and video calls with providers in order to connect with them, to help explain why it's so important to get their content into our systems to support our mutual clients' needs. As I referred to earlier, there is an agreement that we need to sign. And we need to have this agreement signed for several different reasons, but not for every piece of content. For the knowledge bases, where we ingest KBART and MARC records, not the CZ enrichment MARC, but just the general title level metadata, we do not need an agreement. We do, however, need an agreement for non-open access materials, for CDI, and for ALMA CZ enrichment. There's an important note that I want to call out here with regards to the open access content. One of the things that we have learned over the years is just because MARC records are available and just because content may be open access, it does not mean that that provider has the rights to redistribute that content to a third-party vendor like us. So this is where we engage with our legal teams, we engage with the legal side of the provider to make sure that everyone is in full awareness and legally able to supply us with metadata. I'm happy to answer any further questions about that. I know that's been an area of questions for some. Let's see, and then moving on to ingesting the content. So my team, the provider relations team, we don't do that, but we do send the requests over to our operations team. With regards to ongoing support, my team does handle writing Knowledge Center articles. We write internal documentation for other teams as well to make sure that we are sharing information. And we also work with Rail to post information back to the Idea Exchange. So that handled the new content ingestion process. When it comes to refreshing content, we have a similar type process as well, but as you can see by the arrows, it is a back and forth. So there are times that the provider reaches out to us to say, hey, we haven't sent you new content in a while, we would like to get it updated. We're always happy to hear from providers. So we will work with them to send the request over to our operations team once we get the files. Conversely, or reversely, I should say, either our operations team in the course of doing QA as we're loading content or in reviewing support tickets, we will notice that we need to reach out to the provider to either get new files or to get a feed refreshed in CDI. At that point, we will engage my team, the provider relations team, and in turn engage the provider to get the content refreshed. Once we get the information from the provider, of course, as you see at the top of the screen, we will move the request over to the operations team for ingestion. I want to take a second here to highlight that we very much rely on using our automation tool. So when we do hear from providers, one of the very first questions we ask is, what is your update frequency? To make sure that we set the collections up to be routinely refreshed and we don't run into problems in the future. So here I just want to highlight again, it's the same process that you see in the last two slides, but to highlight where my team's workflows touch on this process. So with the new content requests, the roadmap is set by our content product manager, Rail, and that is particularly for brand new providers that we've never worked with before. If we have worked with the provider, they're already in our system. We hear from them and either, like I mentioned in previous slides, we either receive the request from them or we send the request to them. My team coordinates with GCA, the Global Content Alliance team, that is our legal team, to ensure that they're in touch with the right person on the provider side. Sometimes we may have to answer further questions about how our systems work, so it can be a three-party conversation in order to get the agreement signed. There are times that the agreement signing can take several months or more, depending on the legalities that need to get into for both sides. My team submit requests to the operations team to ingest the content or to set up automation. And we also do content analysis for both the knowledge bases and the discovery side. On the knowledge base side, that's a little more straightforward. We will open up the KBART file, which is an Excel file, make sure all of the necessary metadata is there and in the right place, and turn it over to the operations team. The discovery side is a lot more complicated, depending on the size of the feed and the complexity of the metadata. We will get samples from the provider. We will review them to make sure that all the necessary metadata is there as well. We will ensure that rights can be handled, meaning we understand how to set up the collections in the knowledge base in order for the rights to be made available and show the correct content in the discovery index through Summon or Primo. So there's a mapping effort not just between the knowledge bases, but for CDI as well. As I've referred to earlier, we have 3 knowledge bases, SFX, ALMA, and 360. We also ensure that the mapping is accurate across all 3, so that we're setting up the collections for all 3 products at the same time, and all 3 will be updated. Lastly, I've touched on this already, but for ongoing support, my team does handle support cases. We write Knowledge Center articles where relevant. So for example, if we're waiting to hear from the provider to get new files, or if the provider has alerted us to a known issue, we will publish a Knowledge Center article to that effect. We also maintain an internal wiki to ensure that all of our teams are aware of the different needs of the provider, different file locations, different ways to contact the provider, should somebody need to reach out to them. Okay. So my team and outreach activities. I'm so proud of the work that my team does. These are figures from about 2020 to June this year. I have 6 team members, 2 in the US and 4 in Israel. We manage about 216 relationships. And by manage, I mean we have dedicated staff members to handle those relationships. Those are anywhere from bi-weekly to quarterly calls to go over content. As you can see in this right panel here, we overall have collaborated with 442 providers. That means reaching out to them on behalf of you all for casework, or they have found our email address, provider.relations@exlibrisgroup.com, to contact us about their concerns. And we've handled over 2,000 concerns in the last year and a half. We've done 35 quarterly business reviews, so that is time set aside by my team members to work with the providers to do a high-level analysis of the state of their content in our systems. We have done a lot of work this year to improve the visibility for providers to understand how to work with us. To that effect, and with the help of the content working group, many thanks to them, we have created a landing page on the corporate site, exlibrisgroup.com, for content providers to find us. We have also used the Knowledge Center to create more articles, some of these articles that Scott has been sharing with you, on how to work with us, how to find technical specifications, how to understand how our products work, in addition to the Knowledge Center articles that you all may be familiar with. We have reached out to these, these 400 providers to receive nearly 8,000 title lists for all 3 knowledge bases. And we have done 15 mapping exercises specifically for priority providers like Springer, for example, to make sure that all of the collections are set up in ALMA, SFX, and 360. We have also done in-depth content analysis for 26 discovery feeds. Okay, and last but not least, of course, I have an idea for new content. What can I do to get it in Ex Libris products? And the answer is twofold. So if it is a brand new provider to CDI or the knowledge bases, it is a brand new authority file for Alma CZ, or the provider is not currently enriched in Alma CZ, please go to the Idea Exchange. Links down here. If the provider already exists in CDI or the knowledge bases, or is already enriched in Alma CZ, and you're requesting a new collection or wondering why titles aren't enriched, we do ask that you open a support center case so that we can investigate. There may be good reason why that the titles aren't enriched or the collections aren't available, or it's a good opportunity to reach out to providers to get that content. So a little bit more about the Idea Exchange, and thus the capital I for idea. So it is a way for the community to collaborate with each other and for us to hear back from the community as to what new content you want to see in our systems. Rail, our content product manager, oversees this. She regularly reviews the content that's in our systems, and then she will use statuses for tracking the updates. So once the idea has been prioritized for the roadmap, we will put it under review. We will go through different steps, as I referred to earlier, for the outreach and the different parts of the process. If it's already supported, we will notify using the already supported status here. Once it's completed, we will go ahead and highlight it as completed. If you find the idea already in the system, please do vote. We highly encourage that you to vote so that we know it's of value to the entire community. And now I will pause here for questions. Thank you all so much for your time. I'm looking forward to hear what questions you have for me.
Okay, Kat, we did have quite a few questions that came in.
Awesome.
And I'm gonna go through them one by one. So thanks for your patience in advance, everybody, and thanks for you answering all the questions, Kat. First question is, how can publishers get in an account in the Ex Libris Idea Exchange, or can they?
Great question. They cannot get an account today. Well, actually, I take that back. The Idea Exchange, let me just move over here, is openly available. Anyone can sign up for the Idea Exchange. It just requires an email address. In fact, I have voted for different content on the Idea Exchange. Providers can submit their own idea if they want. Our email address, provider.relations@exlibrisgroup.com, for any providers that are out there that want to reach out to us. For any clients, you can use this as well. Also, we will be happy to hear from you through the support center.